We are live.
How's it going, Dr. Van Lent?
It's going well, Daniel. How are you?
Not too bad. Definitely could be worse. Got out fishing this morning.
Could be a lot worse.
Yeah, definitely could have been worse.
Yeah, we snuck out and fished this morning.
Tarpon weren't super cooperative. That full moon had them a little thinking about something else. They didn't want to eat, but we managed to hook a few, so that was good.
Tom, what's new with you? You making it through the quarantine process all right?
You know, the surprising thing is I must have been kind of a recluse before because it really hasn't crimped my style all that much. The only thing I miss is kayaking and being out in the glades and being out in the outside. I mean, I desperately miss, but I guess I was pretty much a homebody other than that. So you know you're a recluse when things don't really change for you.
Well, we've got some people starting to tune in. I think we've got about 50 people watching so far, so it's definitely a good start. And we've got some really important things to talk about today. So I'm sure we'll get a lot of people sharing this out, more people tuning in. And just to kind of get us started, we were actually out fishing this morning. Chris and I took some of our other team members out just to get out on the water and take a look. And it's, you know, the wind was flat calm this morning. You know, it was just incredible. I mean, some of the cleanest looking water I've seen here, probably pre-2013, Chris?
Yeah.
When it's been that clear. Yeah.
I ran out to 35 foot and could clearly see the bottom.
Yeah, and you know, after even last spring, you know, just all that silt that was remaining in San Carlos Bay and around the point of Sanibel. Anytime it got windy, the water would get really milky, and you know, not having discharges from Lake Okeechobee last year, it kind of allowed that to dissipate. And I mean, I didn't drop my anchor today, but I know late 2018. If you went out off the beach and dropped your anchor, it would come up with like nasty black mud. And, you know, last year that got a little bit better, but, you know, as these tides kind of come in and, you know, storms come through, it kind of stirs that up and it gets swept out to tide. But yeah, I mean, definitely some of the cleanest water we've seen. And, you know, we've had a lot of reporters asking us why. And it's, you know, it's something that's pretty common when we have, not much rainfall and we don't have releases from Lake Okeechobee. Our water gets very, very clear here, and you know, the lower estuary looks, you know, it looks like we're in the Keys almost. So it's definitely good to see and good to spend some time out there. And what we want to talk about today is, you know, in this drought, you know, water supply from Lake Okeechobee. We're hearing a lot about, you know, drought in Lake Okeechobee. Can you talk about who? Actually, before we get there, let's talk about for those people that don't know you and your background. You're a hydrologist and you're with the Everglades Foundation. Been involved with Everglades restoration for how long, Tom?
We are coming up on 38 years working
Wow.
in Everglades since 1982, working in South Florida on Everglades issues.
And that was before the really bad seagrass die-off in Florida Bay.
Yeah, that was those were in the early 90s. So yeah, watch that too.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm you've been involved at the agency level and, you know, working for organizations trying to fix the problem. Is that correct?
That's correct. I started my career with the South Florida Water Management District as a hydraulics engineer, and did a lot of computer modeling. Worked on the development of the computer model that was used in the Everglades planning. And then I worked for Everglades National Park as a research scientist. And for the last 15 years have been with the Everglades Foundation as a scientist and hydrologist.
So you're more than familiar with the way the systems work, to put it mildly.
Yeah, one of the things the way I kind of learned it was you have to write down all the rules to put into a model. And once you write down all the rules, you realize just how crazy they are and what they mean. And that gives you a lot of insights into, yeah, I kind of see how this was set up.
Yeah, and that's, let's talk more about that. How was this system set up? It used to be a free-flowing system. There weren't, flood control structures or anything like that. This is something that, over the last 100 years we built, and the system was designed for a very specific purpose. Can you talk about what that is and how it kind of came to be?
Well, there's no single story arc because there was a lot of big events along the way. Certainly one of the biggest events was the hurricane of 1928, killed thousands of people. And the Corps of Engineers rushed to put up a dike around Lake Okeechobee, the Herbert Hoover Dike. And that profoundly changed how the Everglades works. That's when large discharges came down the Caloosahatchee River. They had to dig out the Caloosahatchee River to accommodate these. It's also the connection to the other side of the state and the St. Lucie River. And then no flow went south. So that was the day or the time in the 1930s when it switched from all Lake Okeechobee water used to spill out going south to the Everglades and wind up in Florida Bay. Now that didn't happen. Many water that was excess would get sent to the Caloosahatchee and the St. Lucie rivers. When it was clear that wasn't working the way people wanted it to, because the south part of the system was just parched, dry, super dry. That was and also it was susceptible to floods. That's when the federal government got involved and designed the Central and South Florida Flood Control Project, the system we have in place today. And the pieces that are important, just conceptually, was Lake Okeechobee was a reservoir for water supply for the area to the south, which was the Everglades agricultural area. Set up post-World War II as a strategic farming reserve to grow vegetables for the troops. That was the original idea. Of course, it was all converted to sugarcane by 1960 after the fall of Castro, but the whole idea is that Lake Okeechobee was a water supply reservoir for the Everglades agricultural area. And the rest of the Everglades were supposed to be water supply reservoirs for the urban areas to the lower East Coast. And that's pretty much the system we have today. The lake is a reservoir that was designed and built for the Everglades agricultural area. And
so they're the largest user of water in the system?
Oh, by far the largest single user. In terms of water use in South Florida, they account for not quite half. And then everybody else is the other half. So yeah, just one. They're also less than 1% of the people who are employed. So it gives you the idea of there's a huge disparity between people who and who gets the water. But that's how it was designed in 1948.
So if the sugar industry and the EAA, they get their water from Lake Okeechobee, where do we get all of our water from? Everybody else in South Florida.
Most everybody else, for example, the East Coast, primarily relies on the Everglades for recharge of water and for direct control. Areas like Lee County rely on the marshes in Hendry County and the Big Cypress. Lee and Collier County rely on the marshes in the western Everglades. Some places in Lee County, like Cape Coral, are kind of on their own. They rely on just rainfall. That's why they're a little more susceptible to drought. But most of the rest of us rely on wetlands for our water recharge.
Yeah, and that's water that's percolating down through the limestone, getting into our aquifers, you know, as it's kind of cleaned in the process.
That's exactly right.
So it's, you know, I think we've heard a lot of, you know, especially politically, you know, when it comes to water supply on Lake Okeechobee, that, you know, if we're putting water in the Everglades, you know, we're taking away water supply by doing so. But if, you know, all these, you know, the lower East Coast is using the Everglades from, you know, for their water supply, you know, for that aquifer recharge, that wouldn't necessarily be true.
The way I look at it, if someone is saying that if we give water to the Caloosahatchee estuary or to the Everglades, we're taking it away from people who need water. Well, first of all, almost very little water from Lake Okeechobee is delivered down to the lower East Coast for water supply. Almost nothing. It's negligible compared to the amount of water that's sent for agriculture. So if they're saying we can't send water to anybody, it really is an indication of just how much this one industry views the water in Lake Okeechobee as their, belonging to them, and not a resource of the state of Florida and everybody in Florida.
And do they pay anything for that water?
They have a nominal permit, a couple $100 a year.
And so they're essentially
How much
using
water?
half.
Yeah, how much water are we talking about? Like either daily, monthly, annually?
Well, of course, that depends. For example, in March, during when it wasn't raining at all and there was a large irrigation demand, they were sending the equivalent of 1,500 million gallons per day to the Everglades agricultural area. Put it on some perspective, that's about the same amount of water as that for 8 million people would use that in a day. So in their houses. So it's an extremely large quantity of water. That is today, for example, it's about half that because there was some rain directly over the EAA in the last few days. So it varies, but it can be quite large.
Wow.
Close to 2,000 cubic feet per second is not an uncommon delivery.
Wow. And this, you know, altogether, the way this water management system, you know, like what is it that gives them the ability to have that water versus, you know, it being able to be sent to the Everglades? Like what is the governing, you know, like what's our regulation system about there that controls all that?
Well, this is another example of just how the regulations were written. Right now in Lee County, for example, because up until last weekend, you were really getting the brunt of the drought. Didn't really rain on lower East Coast. And water supplies were looking at the point where the district made the call that you go under mandatory water restrictions. So Lee County has restrictions on water. I kind of expect to see that happen in the lower East Coast soon, in the Broward and Miami-Dade counties. Probably not Palm Beach, but Broward and Miami-Dade. So the water managers can choose when to make cutbacks. But the way the rule is written for the Everglades agricultural area, they are prohibited from any kind of cutback in irrigation demand until the lake drops to a pretty low level, a little even lower than it is today. It's got to go below a certain line called the water management line. So they can't even take preemptive action to save water like they can for the urban areas, nor do they build in conservation measures. Like if you're in Lee County and you want some water, you have to go to the district and show how you're conserving water before they'll give you any more. That's not the case with the Everglades. They get whatever the crops say they need, or the theoretical limit for the crops.
Wow. Yeah, that's, we're actually talking about that, I think, last week, that a lot of agriculture, like a lot of our buddies in citrus farming, they all have reservoirs on the actual farms to provide water supply for their crops in times of drought. They're not, depending on taking it out of the public lake. They're committing a certain percentage of their acreage to water storage and supply for their own crops on their own properties.
Actually, go ahead, Tom.
No, I was going to say that that is kind of what you have to do if you're on your own. But the Everglades agricultural area was designed to have all of this irrigation infrastructure provided by the taxpayers.
Yeah, and then this system, LORs that we're operating under now, we've kind of become acquainted with that over the last 4 years, and have been involved with the LOSOM planning process as we're, and for those that are listening, and LORS stands for Lake Okeechobee Regulation Schedule. It was developed in 2008 or implemented in 2008, and it determines, once the lake hits, this level during this month, it's a band. It's a chart going over the year. Once it hits a certain level, that determines whether they have to, whether the Corps should be discharging water, holding water back, kind of all of that. And that system in and of itself pretty much picks winners and losers. I mean, it dictates who gets water, when, and why.
Yeah, a little bit of background on it's called the Lake Okeechobee System Operation Manual, or the rule that was developed in 2008. The concern at the time was that Herbert Hoover Dike could fail. There were a lot of episodes when the lake started to reach, get to levels above 16 feet and higher, where there was a lot of concern the levee would float away. And that is not a good condition. You don't want the levee to fail. Would cause potentially massive damage and loss of life. And so the Corps lowered the lake level so they could reduce the risk of the dam failing, so they could go and strengthen the dike. So right now they're in the process of, okay, so they got some of that project done, quite a bit of it. Can they take the lake back, or can they? Let me back up 1 second before. Now, there were winners and losers when the Corps lowered the lake, but you may be surprised on, or may not, who they were. According to the environmental impact statement that the Corps did, the agricultural water supply went down. They had less water. Okay, they basically lowering the lake reduced that lake is their personal and private reservoir, and they got less water. The urban areas stayed the same. They got the same amount of water from the lake because it wasn't very much to start with. So lowering the lake didn't really make any difference to urban areas. Only water supply to the agricultural areas was affected. So now the discussion in LOSOM, in this new process to change the lake operation schedule, is how much more water supply can we get while decreasing estuary discharges. That's what they're discussing.
And there's been a lot of public input on it. I think there's still going to be a lot of opportunity for more public input. But the end point here is we're going to have a system operating manual, within a few years that's going to kind of take into consideration any changes, infrastructure changes, and like you said, how can we, get the most amount of water supply with the least amount of discharge. And that is important because last week we were made aware of a couple of members of Congress that were trying to get language inserted into a huge bill for all the water projects across the country. It's the Water Resources Development Act. For those of us that are involved with this, it's the WRDA bill. But it could be anything from channel dredgings to building all these different Everglades restoration projects, all these different things across the country. And there was this effort made to get this lake operating schedule to be subject to savings clause analysis, which in a couple of sentences that were included in this letter, to anybody that's not a policy junkie working on Everglades restoration, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. It was talking about section whatever applies to this and this. If you were to read it, it doesn't. I don't even think it said the word Lake Okeechobee, and maybe it did, but I mean it didn't talk about what that would do. But it was also they wanted the year 2000 lake regulation schedule to be what was considered moving forward and the savings clause to apply. So that was essentially all the information that was provided by these members of Congress that were trying to get this put into the bill. But can you tell us what would that mean, having this, first of all, what's the savings clause, and what would that mean for this to be subject to the savings clause?
Okay, the savings clause is just kind of the terminology we use. That the idea in the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan is that we're going to build these new projects, and they're going to do good. They're going to give people more than they have now. So there can't be a project that robs Peter to pay Paul. Basically, what's the idea? And so they set kind of a date of enactment that's kind of the benefits, that if you build a comprehensive Everglades restoration project, you have to check to make sure you're not stealing any benefits that were given at that time. But that was supposed to only apply to these new projects. Remember that when the Corps lowered Lake Okeechobee, they did so because of a threat to human life and safety. The dam could fail. What that new law would have told the Corps is it doesn't matter if the dike could fail. You can't do anything that would affect water supply for the Everglades agricultural area. You have to hold the lake up higher, even if it means it could break and kill people. Doesn't matter. They can't do it. If the state of Florida ever said, you know what, I want to take some water that we're giving to sugar right now and use it for the estuaries, the Everglades, give more water to urban areas, the Corps would have been precluded by law from implementing that. They would have been forbidden to implement it. So it was basically an attempt to lock in that sugar gets all the water from Lake Okeechobee. That's what it was, pure and simple.
So I mean, it's really hard to believe, especially that conversation is even happening, in the midst of a pandemic. People's priorities are elsewhere right now, and they're concerned about their jobs. Some people are losing their jobs. This has been a horrendous hit on our economy, and we've been reaching out to a lot of our members, our supporters, our friends, and having conversations. And the number one takeaway is that after this coronavirus crisis is over, we're going to depend on clean water more than ever before. We can't afford another summer of 2018. We can't afford more algae blooms. Our tourism economy, people coming to Florida, people that already live here, the last thing we need is another catastrophe that is controllable on top of this one. So, it just really, it blows my mind that the number one thing that, the Corps has been able to do and over the last few years, what their focus was, last year and again this year, was trying to get at least a little bit more room in the lake, by giving the Caloosahatchee the water it needs, and sending at least a little bit of water to the Everglades, trying to make a little bit more capacity for when the summer rains get here. And if we had more infrastructure, more restoration projects online, could have sent even more to the Everglades, and provided that capacity, the storage capacity in the lake. So once these rains come, that operational flexibility would have allowed them to at least mitigate to some degree these discharges. And it's if you talk to a lot of the restaurant owners, the hotel owners, the CEOs of the Chamber of Commerce over here, that live in a completely tourism-driven economy, to them, any little bit is huge when you're talking about a crisis that can, cause businesses to, overnight, collapse from this. So it just, I mean, Chris, I don't know what your perspective on that is, but the fact that, they're essentially going after what is our saving grace is, and the reason we've had, at least part of the reason why we've had really good water quality last year. It seems really absurd, and it really pisses me off that, this is happening when, with these, couple words, policy legalese that an average person is going to have no idea what that means. And again, people are worried about their jobs, they're worried about their health right now, they're worried about their families. And for, to try to sneak something like this through at a time like this is just, it's absurd. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, my thought is to have special interests working with politicians to try to tie language from the savings clause that was intended for one thing into WARDA and into how Lake Okeechobee's managed, which is not what it was intended for their benefit, and having our representatives who are supposed to be representing us, some of them actually attempting to push that through right now, while the country is worried about, feeding their families and keeping their jobs, is one, what it would do to the Everglades and Caloosahatchee and Lake Okeechobee. What it would do to our ecosystems is absolutely terrible. What it would do as a chain reaction to that, to our local economy coming out of this pandemic is crazy. It's just like, it makes no sense at all unless you are an industrial sugar farm in the EAA. Other than that, it makes sense for no one else. And the fact they're trying to sneak it through, and it's super technical, it's just, it's not something that, the general public would pick up on. Thankfully we're made aware of it, and we're trying to get as many people as we can to understand the ramifications of it. But it could quite literally be the death of the Everglades if something like this was to go through, and to move us back in time to what, years ago, to how that water should be managed.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's it basically locks in the haves and the have-nots. So if you were a have-not before, you're going to stay a have-not. That's what the intention was.
Yeah, and what I don't
Everglades
understand
right now is a have-not.
It is.
Yeah, the Everglades is a have-not. The Caloosahatchee and the St. Lucie are have-nots, and for a variety of different reasons. But the way I look at it is, there's a spectrum here, and the crises that we've seen in the estuaries, the Caloosahatchee, St. Lucie, from the discharges have been terrible. I mean, the amount of blue-green algae blooms, the scale of them, the duration of them, the collapses of both estuaries, it's been terrible. Florida Bay has been, absolutely got crushed in 2015. It's still recovering. It's going to take, another 5-6 years, before it really starts to come back. And, if you're looking at those catastrophes that are a result of this managed system, what's the issue that they're having now that led them to say we have to do this? Like, are we running out of water? Are we having, are we losing 30% of our farm crops a year because, we don't have enough water? Or are we having, like, it doesn't seem like that's the case. It seems like what's happening is they're just wanting something that's a little bit better for them that's going to do a whole lot more damage for all of us.
Yeah. Well, I can't profess to have done a complete and absolutely exhaustive study. I did try to compare crop yields in the EAA to drought, and they don't seem to be correlated. You can get very high crop yields during dry periods, even if you cut back on some water. And so there's no indication that even if they were cut back, that their crop yield would fall. On the other hand, I would say let's look at remember that the way the system used to work is that the Everglades got all the water, all the time. It all went south to the Everglades, through the Everglades to Florida Bay. The system right now, there hasn't been a drop of water crossing Tamiami Trail since October. There's been no water at all going into Everglades National Park for more than 6 months. That's an indication of just how much, and compare that to the water leaving the lake to go to agriculture. It's zero compared to 1,500 and plus cubic feet per second. So there's a huge disparity now, and that can never change by what that policy document said. That's the way it's always going to be. You always get that water. No one else gets anything.
And I think that was really important what you said, Tom, about how the Everglades used to get all that water. That system was the natural system was designed. It provided that fresh water that could flow through the Everglades, recharge our aquifers, and balance the salinity, maintain the salinity in Florida Bay. And as the system that was created now holds that water back. You said earlier, half that water goes to the EAA, which is like 90% sugar. So that's the vast majority of that water is going. And then once the system is full, then discharges start. When it's summertime, system's over capacity, we get these discharges. And this whole WRDA thing, getting the regulation schedule linked to the savings clause, it gives them even, it gives the Corps, it forces the Corps to hold even more water back for them, and it's going to result in more discharges, and they're going to have to hold water back for water supply that, historically, even now, at least some of that is getting down to Florida Bay. So it's lose-lose on all fronts for our environment.
Yeah, and there is an alternative. For example, if you take Mr. Mast's proposal of lowering the lake to create some capacity, one way to do that is give water to the Everglades. You're like this. It makes perfect sense. You could lower the lake and provide a benefit to the Everglades. That is probably not going to happen, and it certainly wouldn't happen under the rules that were proposed by that language. So you can't even take a lot of good ideas that implement eco-friendly kind of operations and allocation of water because the existing rules are kind of locked in.
Yeah, and that's, I think that's what's really frustrating about this. You know, it's happening in a pandemic. You know, they're going after this in a pandemic, and they're essentially, you know, cutting the public's voice out of this, because there is a process that's happening right now, a public process of this new Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual, where they're weighing all these different areas, going through, you know, thorough, you know, review of all this to ultimately, you know, and hopefully get somewhere that provides water supply that's needed and reduces discharges and gets the Everglades the water it needs. At least that's what our suggestions were, and that's, you know, attending the public meetings. That seems to be the you know, what the vast majority of the public interest that's there wants. And, you know, in doing this and trying to backdoor this, you know, legalese description or clause that they're trying to put into a federal bill, I mean, it's cutting the voice away from the public, silencing our you know, our requests. And when I mean public, I mean even groups like Captains for Clean Water, individual businesses that have shown up, chambers of commerce, all these different groups and individuals that weighed in on this. This is just kind of like the dirty political way of cutting them out of the conversation and trying to preempt it through legislation to where it's like, no, you got to do this because, you know, here's what this bill says. Is that, I mean, am I wrong with that?
You nailed it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what's frustrating. I'm pissed off now.
If you weren't
for the person watching who doesn't, you know, dive into Everglades restoration policy, water use policy, like some of us might, you know, in a nutshell, what is being proposed to be done would add language that would basically hamstring the Army Corps of Engineers on some of their flexibility to try to benefit our natural ecosystems, which would basically result in less flexibility in managing the lake, which, as we've seen, in taking a less flexible approach, we've seen higher discharges. We see an Everglades that doesn't get the water it needs. Is that kind of a very trimmed down way to say what's being attempted here?
The end around was a very apt analogy, that if it's easiest just to go to Washington or Tallahassee and have them write a law that gives you exactly what you want, and then situation, it's over. I mean, that, and the rules we have now for water allocation are the result of decades of that kind of thing happening. And it just is, it's literally written into the rules and regulations for how to manage the Central and South Florida project. So it's still going to be, it's always going to be an uphill fight to try to change those rules. It's hard enough, but when there's the capacity to just jump right to the outcome, that's always going to be, for some, the
I mean, it's pretty obvious from, you know, what we've seen the last few years that what's currently we have going on doesn't work. You know, it doesn't work for majority of the people in the ecosystems most of the time. And to try to lock us into a situation of where we are with kind of prohibiting our ability to change that to where it does work better for everyone involved is obviously not a good thing. I mean, we don't want to be locked into the situation that we're in now or that we were in 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, it really comes down to our politicians need to be paying more attention to this and realizing they need to look beyond the funders of their campaigns, and they need to look and see that, jobs in Florida, American jobs, here in the state, they all depend on clean water. I don't care whether you're, a waterfront restaurant, a hotel, or the mechanic that's 20 miles inland who's working on people's cars that have these jobs. I mean, it's a trickle down effect, and if nobody comes to Florida for the mosquitoes, people come down here for the clean water, the sun, and the beaches. And as soon as you remove one element from that equation, whether it's the sun or the water, I mean, when you start removing those, people disappear. I mean, we see it happen every time we have a water quality crisis. People leave. They start putting negative reviews on TripAdvisor, and they're gone. And that's something that our policymakers need to do a much better job, rather than trying to backdoor kind of policy without being transparent on what they're doing. That's a serious issue. I mean, it just shows you they're looking more at their campaign contributors than they are, the jobs in their district and the districts all across South Florida. Because this is, if you don't think clean water is absolutely critical to our economy, then I mean, you're dead wrong on that one.
And before you can have clean water, you have to have water. And
yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Well, I think two things, Daniel, is one, where could folks watching go to see like an overview of what we've been talking about with this savings clause hijacking attempt? Where can they go to kind of see an overview of that?
So what we have right now on our site is we put people want to know what they can do to help. We have a call to action tool on our site at captainsforcleanwater.org, right on the homepage. You'll see it on Facebook as well. We have a couple videos that we posted on Facebook where people can click it, take action, and tell their member of Congress to stop this. Don't do it. Don't give special interest what they want. You got to do what's good for all Floridians. So that page is up on our site. We are working on adding some more details to that really talks about the specifics. Some of the stuff we talked about in this conversation. Like in putting this language in that bill, what does it look like? Well, what it does is it lets the Corps, or it forces the Corps to hold more water back for irrigation supply for the largest user of the system, the EAA, which is about half the water, as we learned from Dr. Van Lent. So it forces the Corps to do that, and you can learn more right on that page. We'll keep adding more information to this so that you can and kind of like a one-stop shop where you can go on there and learn about what specifically this would do, why it's bad, and also provide the opportunity to where you can send a message right to your member of Congress. It's super easy: name, address, email. I think it wants your phone number. You click submit, goes on to the next page. You preview your message and click send. It takes about 1 minute to do it. We've already had about 4,000 people in the last 3 days since Friday night that have sent letters, and hopefully we can get way more than that. But it's just about getting that education out so people can really understand. This was not something that there was a presentation made saying, hey, we want to do X, Y, and Z, and here are the results we can have. No, that didn't happen. That's what pissed me off about it. And, that's the problem here. It wasn't there was no transparency. It was a bunch of legalese, or a small amount of legalese that meant nothing at first glance. But, you know, those 2 or 3 sentences that they're trying to add to the word of bill could forever change, you know, who gets water and when and why for. And, you know, it makes the current winners win more, and the current losers, which is our environment and our economy here in Florida, it makes us lose more. So it would, you know, it's just a bad all around thing with zero transparency.
Yep. That's basically it in a nutshell. So on our site, we do have that form where you can take action. You put in your name and address. It'll identify who your representative is, and you can send them an email asking them that they not go through with this, adding this language. And 2, we're going to be adding more kind of a breakdown information about what that language means, you know, for us, for our environment, for the Everglades, if it was to go through. So I think it's important. This is one of those times where people want to ask, you know, what can we do? Here's your opportunity. Send an email. It takes about 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's it. And, you know, please, you know, there's 50 people watching here now. You know, share this out. We've got to get, you know, more people, you know, educated on this. I think this is, you know, so far has been a great conversation with Dr. Van Lent. So, you know, we need to get people watching this and sharing it out, and, you know, making it a part of your conversation. I know there's not a whole lot you can do right now, and I think everybody's got at least a little bit of free time where they can spend, you know, say an hour every night, you know, getting up to date on this, reaching out to your friends, educating yourself on it, and really getting people to realize, you know, how impactful this would be, you know, if this change were to happen, if we were to allow, you know, our lake regulation schedule to be subject to the savings clause, which it was never intended to be, and, you know, would result in more discharges. That's very important. You know, it's like we can, you know, we've had a great, you know, our last year and a half, you know, captains, Everglades Foundation, all these different organizations working on these projects. There's been a lot of accomplishments, but all it would take is something like this to have a huge step backwards. And, you know, our economy, you know, we absolutely can't afford that. It's, you know, it's already stressful enough, you know, trying to deal with coronavirus, the red tide we had, the cyanobacteria bloom we had in 2018. You know, there's so many things that are out of our control. This is one crisis that we've put on ourselves for the last 100 years. And, you know, the last 20, 40 years, we've had a pretty good understanding of it. And we've continued to, you know, subject ourselves to cruel and unusual punishment. And, you know, there's a clear winner. You know, the EAA has taken half of that water that, you know, all used to go to the Everglades, and it's causing discharges. I mean, it's a really messed up system. And if we don't get this fixed now, then I'm afraid, you know, future generations aren't going to get to experience even what we got to experience this morning, you know, going out off Sanibel and, you know, hooking some tarpon and seeing, you know, just an incredible amount of life out there. We have a lot to lose. We saw it in 2018. Don't forget any of those images. You know, don't forget what it was like to not be able to go to the beach with your family or go out on the boat with your family, because there's, you know, dead stuff floating all over the place, and mats of you know, cyanobacteria all over our waterways. That's what we're asking for if we go through with this, is more of that. And, you know, I keep saying it over and over again, but, you know, there's people tuning in and out. The fact that this is being done with so little, zero transparency in the middle of pandemic. It's insane. People
Yeah,
need to go on there and those emails.
they're trying to sneak it through, quietly, and there's only one reason for that, because it doesn't have the public's best interest in doing so. But it kind of reminds me of when the previous water management governing board, basically tried to sneak through the lease to extend the leases on the area where the reservoir is going to be built, and where it was one of those things where it tried to be done, quietly and quickly without people noticing, so that there doesn't get to be a bunch of opposition, and they're able to put it through. We saw that there. That's that's by no mistake. That's by design. Special interests, when they're going to fight to have it the way they want, that they've had that luxury here, at the expense of everybody else and all the other Floridians, and the our economy and the environment. They're used to getting what they want, and so they're going to use whatever tactics and means they can. This is one of those examples. They work and leverage their relationship within the political system to get wording into law and get things put into place where they're the beneficiary. The common person, everybody else who's right now worrying about how to pay bills and feed their family, they don't have that luxury. They don't have the ability to go influence their policy makers to get them to act on their behalf. They're supposed to act on our behalf. It's what they're our representative. But once you see special interests and campaign finance get in the way of that, you see the result, and it's blue-green algae and discharges and red tide, and it's bullshit.
Yeah, that it is. And we've got some questions coming. George Ann Peters put the educational material on the captain's site. Yeah, we're working on that. We're going to have a lot more information up tonight or first thing in the morning on this issue specifically. Please share it out with all your contacts. We need people now more than ever to weigh in on this. I mean, this is really some terrible stuff, and we gotta get people woke up on this. Jessica Pinsky, where are the local elected officials on this issue? Great question. This is something that, again, our local elected officials that, are usually, eager to support on stuff like this, they're dealing with a pandemic right now. And I think a lot of them are probably unaware that this is even happening, but we absolutely need their support, especially like Sanibel and, Martin County, the government, Lee County, our county commissioners, our town councils, our Sanibel council. I mean, they all need to be up in arms.
Our
about
mayors.
this. Yeah, Mayor Sanibel, Kevin Ruane. I know he's been very active on all the lake stuff. So, this is definitely something we need him. I'll be giving him a call on this, and all of our local elected officials, they need to be up in arms over this, because it's, they've been at the forefront of this fight as well. And, for restoration projects and restoration funding up in Washington, and something like this is a big enough setback to where, if it goes forward, then, it doesn't really matter what kind of progress we make in the next year, because, it's all, essentially can get taken away real quickly. So
there's a question here. It's a good one. Is what is the timing on this? Like, what are we talking about? This is something that could go through in a week? Are we talking a month? What do we have an idea of what the timing is on this?
Yeah, so it's, Congress is out right now. This is not going to be heard for at least another month. I think it's like 6 weeks until, this would be taken up. But there's committees that this would have to go through. But the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, would be hearing this, and that's still at least 6 weeks out. But the way politics works is deals get cut behind the scenes, very quickly. So it's really important that people are allowed now. You gotta be putting as much heat as we can on right now, because, you don't want some politician, being what they are, to, go in there and cut some kind of deal on this. It's something that we need, our local governments, our, individuals, all the organizations that are fighting on this. We need everybody, together on this, and they need to be loud. So we had a question come up here that we kind of touched on it earlier, but I thought the answer was interesting. So let's talk about this one again. Mason Rose, do the farms pay anything for the water, or do those private companies get to use public's water for free? And if not, is it any different from other states?
I'll take that. Actually, Florida has some very progressive water law, and actually Florida in the 1970s adopted what was called the ideal water law. And the way it works is, in most states, water is a property right, or something you can trade or buy. You own it. Not in Florida. Florida, the water is owned by everybody in Florida, and that there's tests. But the use of water in Florida has to be beneficial. And I'm not an expert on the law, but there's a test you demonstrate, and if you demonstrate that, then you have a right, or you're granted the privilege of using water for a specific period of time. You don't own it, but you're allowed to use it for beneficial uses. So you just have to apply for a permit. So technically, that they don't really pay anything for the water. We give it away, but it's also true that can be rescinded by the state of Florida if it's found not in the beneficial use, or if the state of Florida wants to change the rules, they can. So the farmers don't actually pay anything for the water. All they have to do is get a permit from the state of Florida, from the water management, saying that they can.
So yeah, and there's a lot of taxpayer expense involved in that too. I mean, it's not like it's it's like hundreds of millions of dollars, I'm sure, get spent on this. Oh
yes, the taxpayers of Florida, which are primarily the people who live on the coast, because they pay the taxes, support the water supply infrastructure, flood control infrastructure. Everything is paid for by tax dollars. Yeah, so it's something that's a huge burden to all of us that pay taxes, and they once again benefit from that very well. It's again, the most frustrating thing about it is we're all being burdened by this in a lot of different ways, and they're coming back and saying, well, let's cut around the public process and give us even more benefit and screw the public even more. Yeah, this is something you can each do and look at your property tax bill when it comes out. It should be coming, I don't know, they're starting the process now. But in everybody's tax bill, there's a line item that says Everglades construction project. That's how much you pay to clean up sugar pollution going into the Everglades. So
wow.
If you want to check how much comes out of your pocket every year, just look at your tax bill. There's another one for the water management. That's for everything. So a part of that goes to them too. But that's how much you're paying just to clean up their pollution to the Everglades. And that's all being exported to the taxpayers, or most of it.
And that's to operate the STAs? To
construct and operate the stormwater treatment areas. Yep. Taxpayers have paid not in the order of 2.5 to 2.8 billion, depending on how the accounting goes, and they've paid on the order of 250 million for everything. So it's roughly that's roughly what you get. Is they maybe pay really generous accounting, 25% of the total costs.
So that kind of answers Mike Holiday commented here. Does the same apply for water storage? Do they pay anything for storage capacity for the water? And I think he means, the STAs and the water conservation areas associated with building and maintaining them. So they pay very little. They
pay a tax
20%
per
of what we
acre.
pay.
That generates about $11 million a year. The rest of the cost is paid for by ad valorem taxes and by the legislature. But you can check what your ad valorem tax is by looking on your tax bill. Water storage is kind of a different thing because that's all in the water management district line. But no, they don't. The only thing they pay for is most farms are irrigated. They have to pull water out of canals with a pump. They have to pay for their pump.
And the permit. Pump and the permit.
Yeah.
Pretty small price.
Wow.
Bruce Rubin, where can we find key talking points to include when contacting our congressional members? So Bruce, on our site, captainsforcleanwater.org, and we'll drop a clickable link here in the comments as well. But on the site, you can click to take action. You put in your name and address. It then knows who your representatives in Congress are. You click take action, and then within that is a body of the email to the congressional members that's pre-written that basically is stating that you would not like to support this action or would not like them to support this language and action being included. So that's already in there. You can alter it and include any of your own messaging, but those points are already in there for your reference.
Yeah, and that's we're gonna kind of continue to tweak some of that stuff that we have on our site, some of our resources. So you'll have all that information available. Like I said, this was no congressional offices, reached out to us. We were, well, I shouldn't say that's how we were made aware of it, but that our input was not solicited for this. It was something that was clearly done behind the scenes, and it was something that we found out about it middle part of last week, and there was a letter, a sign-on letter sent of a few policymakers. It was sent by like Friday or something. So they were very much trying to push it through at the last minute, under the radar. And also under, I really don't think they would have attempted to do this if it wasn't for the coronavirus. I mean, I think, people are, I was so surprised even when I heard about, this happening. It just doesn't seem, like in a normal time that people would stand for this. And, we've really got to take this as an opportunity to fight back on it. We've got to get people educated. So, please share this out and get everybody to chime in on this. This is really important.
Mike Holiday, if Sugar doesn't pay anything for water storage and runoff, moving of properties to STAs, which essentially takes a large percentage of capacity, why should they get any preferential treatment over public safety? No industry should get preferential treatment over public safety, but when you have a huge coffer to influence the political system, as the industrial sugar industry does for decades, they have used influence on policymakers to have the system and kind of the situation built in their favor and not in the public's. And Doesn't mean it's right. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. Let's see. I think we covered most of the questions in here. At least there's some, this. I don't like this little software thing. I can't really see everything that's coming up. They like disappear after a while on here.
Yeah, I think we've got most everybody's questions. I mean, really, I think the overarching the question we see repeated a lot is, where can we see this? Where can we read it? Whatever, and that's that's the part that is tricky, because like you said, it's a couple sentences and within a massive bill they're trying to, so we're trying to get to where it's easy for you to see that and in non legal terms be able to understand what the results of that would be. But we're definitely working on that. Between doing this when there's a pandemic going on where people are focused on other things and making it very kind of behind the scenes, just legal wording within a bigger bill, those are deliberate moves to try to get something done, for special interests when the people are preoccupied or may not catch it.
Yeah, and I'm going to read the exact language that was the exact clause that they wanted added. So and this will just, I mean, you'll fall asleep. It's only one sentence, but it just kind of show you the level of, language that's being used here. Section 601H5 of Public Law 106-541 applies to the Lake Okeechobee Regulation Schedule, and the Secretary shall use the Lake Okeechobee Regulation Schedule in place December 2000 as the base condition for the analysis required under Section 601H5 of Public Law 106-541. To an average person, or even above average people, or below, I think I think pretty much anybody, unless you're a policy junkie that's working on Everglades restoration, or a lawyer, that means absolutely nothing. And the fact that was being pushed without any, I mean, the level of repercussions that we could face as a result of this are enormous. They're huge. And that's the kind of stuff, like, you look at that and you're like, all right, most people don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
I mean, how the hell could you know what that means? I wouldn't I wouldn't know how to find anything out of that 4 years ago when we were out there fishing and catching tarpon for a living.
Well, and they're just trying to, and trying to take advantage of a situation where people are focused on other things. Teams, organizations like ours or Everglades Foundation, who do keep their finger on the pulse of things that are going on, where there's other stuff going on. You're working remotely. You're not, not in your offices. There's just a lot of kind of uncertainty that's going on just in general. So the timing of it and the way it's being done, it's just, luckily it was noticed, but unless people kind of take action and make their voices heard, it's very likely you see our representatives, if they don't know that you're opposed to it, just go in the way of the campaign checks flowing.
Did we lose Daniel?
Oh, we might have lost Daniel. Yep, he's gone. Daniel's gone. That's all right. Now what's going on here? Daniel's
back. I don't know what happened there. I disappeared, and then I was back.
We missed you. Welcome back.
I was lost somewhere in the matrix.
Glitch.
Who knows how long I was really gone? Could have been forever.
My comments aren't loading.
Mine's not either.
I have subpar internet here, Tom, at my house. It's like I think it's guaranteed like 3 megs, which I don't know what the hell that means, but sounds pretty low. And I think I get about half that.
The price of living in paradise.
Yeah.
Not.
I have a little hamster out at my street that runs around in a wheel, and I see electricity bounce up there, and so it fires up my router. Yeah, we don't have great internet. That's been one of the blessings and curses of quarantine. It's great because sometimes you just can't be on that Zoom call. But
please post the clause 601 line. That's classic and the line that everyone needs to know.
Cool. Yeah, we'll definitely do that. We'll get that out there. And I mean, like I said, I mean that means nothing to anybody. You know.
But what it means is, here's the clause. Here's the language. What this means to you and I as fishermen is more discharges, worse water quality.
Yep.
Oh.
I mean, Mike there, this first sentence, a politician's main job is to get reelected. That's 100% it. I mean, if you look at what's going on in Tallahassee, Washington, anywhere you're at, I mean, they go up there and it's more fundraising for their next reelection. So, I mean, it's definitely a broken system overall. But, you know, still what we do know is that when people speak up on these issues, we can have an effect on the outcome. So it's really, really important to, do everything we can. Jessica coming on here again, keep the pressure on local and state elected officials as well. Absolutely. Look, they're all tied up with this coronavirus thing. I bet you half of them don't even know this is an issue right now. Like we've got to reach out to all of them, get them really, educated up to speed on this, because like I said, this was done under the cover of a global pandemic, something we've never experienced before. So I've seen pictures of all of our elected officials doing community service or hosting webinars or whatever they're doing. Like this is something that we really need to get out to them and ask them to help us with, because it's going to take all of our supporters. We need every single person out there sending the email. Super easy, CabinsForCleanWater.org. We need all the organizations sending sign-on letters. Building consensus around this. Like it's going to take all of us fighting back on something, and it's something that's easy to do because our future entirely depends on this. We can't afford.
It's trying to like sneak this through now while all this other stuff is going on is kind of like trying to sneak something like this through during a hurricane, or in a hurricane that's lasting 6 months. It's like when there's a hurricane hitting Florida, everybody's focused on that. You're focused on helping your neighbors, on trying to get your house patched back up, power turned back on. It's very similar to, it'd be like trying to sneak something like that through during a hurricane, where you just focused on so many other things.
Yeah.
There was a question here that I see in my feed about, well, why wouldn't it be better if we had the Everglades agricultural area farmers grow a different crop that uses less water? And that's the essential question. I don't know about which, I'm not an expert in agriculture, so I don't know which crop gives the most benefits or overall best economic return. But here, I'll kind of point out this thought. If instead of just giving water away because it's not harmful, it's beneficial in some way, and instead we applied a way to give the most benefit out of the water we have, I think you'd see a massive shift away from using it to grow sugarcane, which employs maybe 15,000 people directly and indirectly, And then places like the Caloosahatchee estuary, making sure our estuaries are healthy because of the tourism impacts, making sure the lower East Coast and the West Coast have sufficient water. You'd see a reallocation of water based upon getting the most benefit for the most people.
Great question. So, you know what? Mike Holliday chimed in here again. He actually kind of spells this out pretty well here. Sounds like the proposal is designed to assure the Lake Okeechobee operational schedule is maintained so that the sugar farms and the EAA have access in perpetuities to the exact amount of water and drainage they've historically had, no matter what is beneficial to public safety or public needs, i.e. the environment. The sugar farms are assured they get what they want first.
I think that's probably a
Pretty,
summary.
yeah, pretty good summary of good job, Mike. Want a job?
Yeah.
Well, guys, I think we've kind of hit everybody's questions. It's 5:45.
Oh yeah, it's already 5:45. So yeah, I think this is really productive. I think we got a lot of great conversation here. A lot of good perspectives from Dr. Van Lent. Thank you for joining us tonight, Tom, and offering all your built-in encyclopedia of all things Everglades. Offering a lot of that up. I think it was really good for everybody on here to hear it right from an expert that's been working on this for 38 years. Your entire career around Everglades. Thanks for everything you've done for the Everglades. Both within the government and through your work at Everglades Foundation. We really appreciate all that, and appreciate you taking the time tonight to get us up to speed and get all of our supporters up to speed on this, and really letting them know how important it is that they stay involved and get more of their friends involved with us.
And I want to thank you, Daniel and Chris, and the entire captains organization. You're definitely all-stars, and you're moving the needle like no grassroots organization is. And so just thanks for doing what you're doing. You rock. So thank you.
Well, thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks a lot for joining us. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I know it's fun and rewarding for all of us, our whole team at Captains. But getting out there this morning and on the water and messing around with this tarpon for a little bit, that was definitely kind of a little flashback to the old job. Kind of missed that for sure. But
yeah,
I think it was definitely good to get out there and get some of our team out there to kind of see what it is that we're really fighting for. When you get one of those tarpon that you manage to fool, and when they take off in that first run, that fit of rage, like your heart stops, everything like goes slow motion on you, and it's just like you have a moment where you think like, who the hell wouldn't want to do everything they possibly could to make sure that their kids and their grandkids got to experience that? Because it's like we've seen such a decline in the last 20 years of I'm 29 years old now, and I vividly remember seeing this decline, especially over the last 20 years. It's like, who the hell wouldn't want to do everything that you could? I mean, literally everything you possibly could to save this. And with so much dirty bullshit going on the political side of it, it's really frustrating. But it's important to get out there. At least for me, that's one of the big realizations I've had during quarantine is you got to get out there. You gotta experience it, and that's the reason why we fight for this. So the more you can remind yourself of that, and get out there and enjoy it, the harder you're going to fight for this.
Yeah, that was getting out there this morning and seeing all of our old guide buddies who we used to see every morning. seeing them out there and the water being so nice because we haven't had big discharges. There hasn't been a ton of rain. And it's on the rebound from the core, using some of that flexibility last year. But literally we'd pull up and there's tarpon everywhere. Our buddies' clients are hooked up on fish, and multiple of our guide buddies I'd pull up to take pictures of them fighting their fish or whatever, would be up in the tower or on the deck boat, and multiple people said clean water. It's like, look, the water's clean and the fish are happy and going off. And when the water's not clean, they're not. And it's just, they were all super stoked. And you could tell that they saw the connection between good fishing days like today and clean water for sure. And they were pumped about it.
Chris has to drive around and take pictures of other people's fish because he doesn't catch any of his own.
Tom, when you've been a guide for as long as I have, you just don't got to prove much anymore. Captain Dan there, he's got a long way to go to catch up to me. So he's still got to go out and fish hard, like grind every day. I've been doing it long enough now. I can stop and smell the roses.
Way to throw the shade. That's great.
I just go out there and whistle, and they start showing up. They always come running to the boat. Oh, here you go. Oh, I want that one. Boom.
All right, Tom. Thanks, man. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Thank you.
Please spread the word on this. Go to our website. If each one of you watching gets 10 people, shares this, take action, and gets 10 people to take action, we can really make a big difference here. So thanks for your time. Hope you have a good evening.
Thank y'all. Good night.
Okay.
See you, Tom.